Good morning. I feel a little bit more comfortable since I know most of you, so I'm not as anxious now. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Brianna Crosson, Bree. I'm up with building regulations. I'm the office coordinator. Jeff Howell is the assistant building official, and he's here to help with answering questions at the end. So I apologize if I talk too quickly. Please, anybody can hold your hand up and say, please slow down when I get nervous. I talk faster. Public speaking is not a favorite part of mine, so we'll get me through it for 30 minutes. So, with building regulations and permits, first we're going to talk about the introduction of building regulations. Is there a clicker? You're fine. Building regulations help keep us safe and healthy in Greene County. These rules guide how buildings are built and what materials are used. Going through this, one interesting fact that Jeff let me know is that it's actually not some new concept of the modern world. Actually, back in 1772 BC, I'm going to say his name probably wrong, but King Hammurabi came up with, what was it? Hammurabi, thank you. Came up with codes. He was known as the king of laws. He had 248 of them, and he really liked the eye for the eye mentality. So when somebody was to build a house, and if it fell and it killed the owner, the builder would be punished to death. If it fell and hurt one of the children, the builder's child would be punished. So when people think that Greene County regulations are harsh, they're not as harsh as they used to be, thankfully. So we have a little bit more grace with that. We've actually had our regulations since 1964. A lot of people are shocked by that. They think that it's probably something that came around in the 90s, and it's actually been around for quite some time. And it was actually brought in front of the voters, and they had to agree to it. They voted for it, and then it was brought in 1964. So not really a new concept, just a lot of misconceptions about being in the county and out of the city. So our codes nowadays are much longer and much more detailed than they were back in the 1772 BC. To help with that, we actually utilize the 2012 ICCs and the 2011 electrical code. Our building inspectors are always referring back to those manuals and making sure that they're getting the right information out there to the residents. Why do building regulations matter? I don't know if you guys remember back in 2015 when 5 people were injured from a deck falling. The building regulations really are there for our residents. It's to keep them safe, their health, and make sure that Greene County as a community is well protected. They also help with the practices of the building industry. That way we have structural integrity and safety and not something like this happening. It's always bad when somebody gets hurt. So that's why building regulations matter. It doesn't matter until somebody you know is actually hurt by something. And with our building regulations staff, right now we currently have a chief building official, an assistant building official, and 4 building inspectors. So those of you may know this gentleman, Dave Odell, with the county, chief building official, and as the assistant. And then we have 4 great building inspectors, Mark, Mitchell, Matt, and Mike. They do help the residents answer questions. They prefer to help walk them along the process and help guide them. It is something that we encourage when there are questions that they just reach out to the guys. It's not something willy-nilly that there's just penalties when they get something wrong. We try to help guide them through the processes. The county building inspectors ensure that our construction projects adhere to the legal frameworks, including those international codes that I had talked about. The inspectors actually go out through the entire building process. So before any footings are poured, they go out and they'll look to make sure all the forms are correct. They'll go out once they got that frame up, make sure their electrical is right, their plumbing's right. Because when it comes down to it, once again, it really matters to the safety of our residents. So what needs a permit? This is a really good question, and you could almost probably get a different answer from anybody you talk to in the county. Um, so, a few things that need them is going to be new structures. New structures are going to be permanent or temporary. They're going to be houses, accessory buildings, pools, decks, manufactured homes. Believe it or not, storage containers. Even though you can move them around your property, they do need to be permitted every time they are moved. So, if they are on your property, they get a permit. Um, Chicken coops, dog kennels, pergolas, the little kits that you get at Sam's, those would need to have a permit because we're going to have people under them. Something could possibly happen. Yes.
I'm intrigued by the notion that a chicken coop needs a permit. So I've seen those mobile chicken coops that have wheels on one end that you can just pull from one side of your yard to another. They kind of spread out the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how small a chicken coop, or is that a more permanent structure that they're talking about?
120 square feet.
Okay.
And you want to add to that? Do you put electrical in there? It'll need a permit. So you're going to keep your chickens air conditioned or heated.
Okay.
You'll need to have a permit.
Does electricity supersede the size requirement?
You would need an electrical permit. It would not be a permit for the structure.
I buy my eggs at the store.
Much wealthier man than I am. They're expensive now. A few things that are exempt from needing permits are going to be playhouses and tool sheds that are under 120 square feet. You do still have to adhere to our zoning regulations and our code regulations. And I'll give you an example towards the end, but you'll want to stay off the property lines, watch for easements, that kind of stuff. You won't want to connect, we've seen it, playhouses to the house. So separate structures. Remodeling and additions, adding or removing a new deck. That will require a permit. Expanding on accessory structures, lean-tos. Some people are like, well, the building was approved. I'm going to throw on a 10 by 24 lean-to and put my tractor in there. Still going to need to have a permit for that. Replacing your rafters, your roof deck, anything structural is going to need a permit. However, taking those shingles off, you're not going to need to have a permit. What we consider cosmetic work, carpet, cutting down hardwood floors, doing your paint, changing out a vanity without moving the plumbing, anything cosmetic would not require to have a permit. Now, if you go to swap out those windows and you get in there and the wife says, really want a bay window, going to have to get a permit for that because you're going to change the structural integrity of that wall. And a lot of people forget the little jobs. This actually shocked me when I started working for the county because I can't tell you how many water heaters I've replaced in my life. Water heaters, swapping out electrical panels, HVAC systems, generators, gas log, gas furnace, those are all going to require a permit. It just goes back to that life safety. We want to make sure everything is put into code and our residents are safe.
Brianna, I got a question.
Mhm.
So I'm do it yourself or a water heater built out. Can I replace it myself? I just need to get
Absolutely. With Greene County, that's a great question. A lot of people ask, well, does my builder have to be licensed? Do I have to be licensed? There's very few things that you actually have to be certified or licensed for in the county if you can build to the code that is currently adopted. A few of those that you would have to be certified in, wastewater installation, you'd have to have a master electrician for solar panels. So really, if you can do it yourself or you have a builder that can do it themselves that does build to code, they're absolutely welcome to come build in the county.
I've got a question. So I am not a do-it-yourselfer. I paid someone to switch out an HVAC system or something. So is that on me then to get that permit? Is to make sure that my guy is doing the permits, or is there some sort of business overhead thing that they are required to do that if they're doing business in Greene County?
Another great question. It actually ultimately comes down to the property owner. We are not a fining county. We do not go after contractors. That would be considered a civil case. So anything tied to your property becomes your responsibility. And that includes buying other people's mishaps. So if you purchase property that has issues on it or needs that needed to be permitted and something came along, it ultimately would be your responsibility to make sure that it was up to code and done correctly. So there are a couple of misconceptions. Well, I don't live in the city. I don't need a permit. That is a huge one. A lot of safety issues come out of that. So when we're not in the city, somebody could be, well, I'm not even in a subdivision. You still need to have a permit. Some examples of it, these were built out in the county. The gentleman on the top left built a house without a permit. Wonderful family. One of the great things I love about our department is we're not punitive. We understand people make a mistake. There's going to be human error. We will work with you to get you up to code. You're going to pay the same amount to us. You might have to pay extra for engineering and stuff, but we're not going to penalize you for not knowing. The gentleman actually did get that into compliance. He got a permit for it. He actually now has his father living with him in that home and has since got an accessory structure, and he calls every time he is going to think about doing anything. And the gentleman on the bottom right, storage containers, they're a fun one. This gentleman moved from California, bought some property, and decided I'm going to have me a container home. I'm not going to have any air conditioning in there. I'm just going to take and weld them together, and we'll run our own water. We're going to rough it in Missouri. We're currently in progress with working with this gentleman. He is working with us. So just because you're not in the city, you still do have to get permits. Another one that we hear a lot, well, it's portable. It's temporary. It's not really going to be permanent. I should be exempt from all the regulations. Portable structures can have things added to them, and they can have other issues. One would be on the left. Looks great. That's inside of a storage container. That was actually an Airbnb where people would go in and stay. There is no running water in that storage container. They actually, on a later slide, I'll show you where they went to wash hands and everything. The one on the right is a perfect example of a portable that is under 120 square feet, but needs to adhere to the regulations. You're right underneath a power line. So there is a setback required to stay away from power lines when you're placing structures. So being out in the county and under square footage, you still need to adhere to our regulations, and we use multiple departments to go through those. I live out on the farm. I live out on 40 acres. It's mine. I think one of the best ones Jeff heard, I paid cash for it, so I don't need to have any permits. So yes, when you're on land, even if it is designated for chickens or horses or storing hay, you do need to get a permit in the county. These were a couple of portable structures that were brought in because they were out on ag land. The first two on the top left are no longer on that property. The gentleman was storing, this is where our wonderful compliance department comes into place, was storing oil and hazardous waste in that storage container. The bottom right, as you can see, he got himself a nice lookout that he put on top of his Connex box. That structure is no longer there as well. So us being out on property doesn't exempt us. And for the do-it-yourselfers, just because we do it ourselves doesn't mean that we don't have to have permits for what we do. Several safety hazards can come from this. Even the best person using a ruler might need to have a little bit of help. So as you can see, we kind of got a little slanted door there. Uniqueness, he gets an A+ for. 2 lights, 2 rooms, 1 light. So you just hope that the other person, in that one in the middle, that if they're on the opposite side of that wall, they want to have the light off too or on. And height of stairs. It does matter. And we do have, our codes do regulate how high the ceiling needs to be away from those stairs. So definitely we can build it, but we may not want to. So that's kind of what we got from them. So with needing a building permit or building to adhere to the building codes, we go through a permitting process. So you'll submit your building applications and the documents for review. Our staff will check to make sure that it meets safety standards, zoning laws, and environmental rules. A misconception is people think that once they turn in their paperwork, all they got to do is pay, get a number, throw it up in front of their house, and they're good to get going. It's actually a little bit longer of a process than that. When they submit an application, a permit tech will go over, make sure all the necessary documents have been received. Then the first place it goes after that is planning and zoning. One of our planners will look over it, make sure that what people want to do adhere to our zoning laws and our regulations. From that point, it'll come back. A permit tech will write the permit, and then it will go to the building department for review. Make sure that the plans submitted meet and adhere to the codes that are currently adopted. And after that, it will go to our environmental department. We're looking not only for septic and wastewater, we're going to be looking for sinkholes and floodplains, drainage ways, things that our area has a vast coverage in. So we take all these into consideration before we issue a permit. So in 2024, last year, at that time, we had basically 3 permit techs. We had 2,167 applications that were submitted to the office. 2,007 of those were issued. Now, that could be either from not being able to be completed because it did not adhere to any type of regulations or laws, or they just decided that they weren't going to do it. It was too much. Our permit staff actually also takes the scheduling for those building inspections for our building inspectors and our environmental inspectors. So the ladies actually took 8,581 inspections last year. So it stays very busy. We like it that way. Being busy is a great thing. Right now with the permitting staff, we have myself, I'm the office coordinator. We have Emily McKinney. She's been with the county for about 3 years. Cassie Clark has been with us about 2 years, and Miss Lizzie Shell has been almost a year. We actually will be losing Dana. She just came on less than a month ago, and she will actually be transferring down to the recorder's department next week. So if you guys know anybody that likes a busy, productive office, send them our way. What people need for a permit compared to other jurisdictions, we don't require a whole lot. We need a completed application. We, of course, need a site plan. Does not need to be done by a surveyor. And a detailed floor plan that can be drawn up by yourself. We just need the rooms labeled and the dimensions. And once again, most people think, well, I applied, I'm good to go. That does result in stop work orders and project delays and possible higher fees because they may have to contact somebody to come in and double check their work. So our favorite thing is HGTV. I wish they had a disclosure at the beginning that said, please check with your local offices to see if permitting is required. This happens quite often. So on the next slide, we have an accessory building that was permitted. The people decided to put an apartment inside of it. We only found out about it because the person who purchased this didn't have an address. So they contacted our office wanting to know how they go about to get an address for their new home that they just purchased. So we got the fun explanation of saying, well, you don't get to have an address until we get a permit placed. And it was they did a great job. It was a beautiful setting out by Fellows Lake. But it just was not to code. I believe it took quite a while for this one to come into compliance, about 2 years. So it goes back to that ultimately the property owner is responsible for what happens on that property. On the next slide, we have that Airbnb in a storage container. So aerial view looks a lot different than how pretty that looks on the inside. So on the bottom left-hand side over there, that is where they had their porta potty and their hand washing station and their little campfire for people to come and stay at. So we really appreciate HGTV giving people ideas, but we'd like for them to follow through a little bit more. On the next slide is questions. So I hope I didn't go too fast. Yes. Well, great question. Our fees are substantially lower than other areas. Currently, we are still using the only thing I believe in our area you can still purchase at the same price as you could 12 years ago. So we go off square footage and amenities added in. So even a large house isn't going to run the builder a painful amount. Standard accessory structure without any electric, it's under 1,200 square feet, 135 if it's out where septic is. If it's in a subdivision, it's going to run $70. So not too bad. Having your electrical panel changed out, having your gas ran 75, those water heaters, HVAC system generators. The HVAC system and water heaters are 45, generators are 135. That's only because there's more inspections. And ours, unlike some areas, are all in one on a permit. We don't piece it out. So they get everything covered underneath that one permit. Yes.
Since you said, things are not punitive, if by sitting here today, somebody like Christian realizes he's done something,
Somebody
should've
lied.
gotten a permit.
Somebody lied.
Is it a good idea to contact you and say, hey, I upgraded this electrical panel, or I put a, portable shed out, or something like that, and I didn't get a permit for it? Is it good to still contact you? So what happens at that point? You come out and inspect it, and then you just pay the permit fee, and then you're done? Is that how that works?
Well, we won't go out to the property until the permit fee has been paid. So when Christian's friend comes in and is like,
Let's make this more real, because I did have my outdoor AC unit changed out 2 summers.
Mhm.
And I had a hot water heater changed out maybe 8 years ago. I have no idea if they got a permit. So how would I, as a property owner, if I wanted to make sure that I was clean and clear, if I wanted to sell my home in a year, how would I go about that?
you
Say
just
you
call the
won't come out
office.
if I don't pay the fee, but can I just come and say, did I get a permit for an HVAC unit in 23 or 22?
Absolutely. Anybody can call in and say, this is my address. Can you tell me if I have any active or past permits on this property? We get that a lot. We're not going to go back through and say that they're in the process of doing your HVAC system and you called and you said, hey, I want to make sure, and they didn't. We're not going to come out and then do a whole investigation on your home. We're going to have you or your builder pull a permit, and then we'll come out and look at the work that they did. And we don't do fines. They're going to pay to us the exact same amount they would have from the beginning. Yes. They would not have been able to live there. That is one thing. Once you do call in and we are aware, you are going against regulations. So one of our compliance officers is then notified. Anybody from the assessor's office can tell you that they probably go out and see a lot of living quarters put in accessory structures, and that changes how things are taxed. We want to make sure that our residents are safe. So we would have a code compliance officer explain that to them. Worst case scenario, they still absolutely refuse to do anything. And like Jen said last week, it would then go through the court system. But we really do try to explain to them, sit down, be patient, and just kind of talk to them one-on-one. A lot of people don't do it out of ill intent. They just really don't know.
Still issue fireworks tent permits. How many did you have last year?
We absolutely do firework tents. It's $425 for a firework tent. We usually see those start coming in about May or June. Last year we had, 18? 15, 18. So we go out, we look at it, make sure that they're all set up appropriately and safely to be able to sell those fireworks. And then after the season's over, we go out and make sure that they are no longer on the properties. Anyone else? Got any hard questions for Jeff? Dave, you got one for Jeff? No? Man, he paid some people off. Well, thank you for making it an easy presentation, guys.